Here we've got the complete workings of the cylinder. Now this was the reason why the thing had to come to bits in the first place, as the little E-clip had actually fallen off the back of the piston, and so the piston was no longer moving and all these little bits and pieces were just rattling around inside. So you just need to put them back together. As you can see, that's got a recess in it, and so that's going that way. Now I'm just copying the way that the other cylinder is set up. So the O-ring goes on first, and then this little washer, and then the piston, like so, and then this little E-clip sits on the back. Now this replacement one is not stainless, but I wanted to do a test run, so I'm just using a standard black steel one, but I will remove the head again and replace that with a stainless one when it turns up, as it's a pretty simple job. Now all of these ends, and the same as the one here on the front, are actually just a press fit. There was some form of retainer on it, I'm not completely sure what it was, but as I'll be taking this one off again, I'm not going to use anything for now, but basically just tap it in with something soft. There you can see it's sitting nice and flat. So I'll do that end first, so then it gives me a nice flat surface to work on now when I put the piston in. Right, when it comes to fitting the other end, you have to be careful that obviously you're not going to damage anything, and you don't want to be smacking right here on the end or anything like that. So I'm just using a small piece of brass, and basically just carefully working my way around. And there you can see it's gone in nice and straight, no damage on the front face, and yeah. All that's left is to just fit the valve spindle, and that just slides down inside. It's quite a close fit. I'll just put a little bit of oil on it as well, as I've been reassembling it. So yeah. Now to install it. With the chimney off the front, you can actually see how small the boiler actually is inside the cladding. This is a view looking down the single flue tube. These indentations that you can see are used to increase the surface area, which helps the water to heat up faster. Here's the gearing system on the rocket. Now you can see this little hole here. This is where the pin from the back of the eccentric on the wheel fits into. And when driving, this is spinning off the eccentric, which then drives the cog above, which you can see, and then that drives back onto the cog on the back of the wheel. Now to run this one-to-one rather than the gearing that it has at the moment, all I need to do is remove this gear here and basically fasten the eccentric, which normally spins inside the wheel, just join the two together, and that should give me 1-to-1 ratio. Here you can see on the back of the wheel the eccentric that drives the valve gear of the rocket. Now I've Loctited this into the wheel, which should give me 1:1 ratio instead of the geared, which is how they come out of the factory. Right, I'm just putting the eccentric strap back onto the eccentric on the back of the wheel, and then sort of threading it in. Sort of put that onto the axle. And hopefully, as I showed before, that pin will just lock into the, you can just see it, it's just locked in there, and that cog's locked. The cog no longer does anything, but it's a good spacer. Right, I'm just putting the cranks back on, and you can see here, being a little slip eccentric, that this is where this little pin locates into, and so when you switch between forward and reverse, it moves around 180 degrees and, for forward and reverse. So all you need to do is make sure that obviously you've got this little flat here, matches the one on the back of the axle, and then that pin goes somewhere in that slot. So just hold the other side, you can see there. Screw. Hold the crank on the other side so that the axle doesn't turn while you tighten it up. And that's it. That is one of the cranks fitted again. And here you can see it moving. And that's how you change direction. Either move it forward or back. Right, we're now going to fit the front back onto the boiler. Pretty simple. Just chuck these up in here. Like so. And then there's a couple of screws with star washers. These go into the bottom ones. Just leave that slightly loose so that I can line up all the others. Now, for some reason, the top screws are a Phillips head, and the bottom ones are a flat head screwdriver. Just go around and make sure that they're all nice and secure. Right, we're going to have a go at fitting this left-hand cylinder here. Now what you need to do first is put these little fibre washers back on the stands. There's 4 each side that hold the cylinders in place, and then there is one that sits there on top of that banjo fitting. Now hopefully I can get them all lined up. Now these are the screws, and you can see that I've got another fibre washer sitting on these, so that's the 4, and these come in from the bottom, and then these are the mounts that hold the cylinder. We'll have a go. I'm just doing everything up quite loosely in the hope that everything will actually line up. And it looks like all of them have engaged, and I've gone through the fibre washers. Now before you go too far, you do need to put that steam pipe back on. Now that just slots on and fits into the chimney. Right, there are no pins on the valve gear on these things. Basically, you've got your eccentric rod, and this is your valve rod, and they just clip together like that. So that can lead to issues later on, obviously, because as they wear, they do just pull apart. So one of the modifications that may end up happening to this one will be that they get drilled through the centre and have a proper pin added. That way I know that they won't fall out while it's running. Right, we're now ready to fit the actual piston rod, and at one end it's a small screw. So just go around the screwdriver. And this screws into the crank on the wheel. And as before, with the valve, these just clip together, so you can just see them like that. Nothing special about it. Right, and there we have it. Basically a rocket back together. I've done both cylinders. I did the other one off camera just because it was a little bit fiddly. And all that's left now is to fit the gas burner. Here we've got the burner broken down into all of its component pieces. Just had a bit of a clean up, but basically you've got your tap here with your little valve jet. Here's your main body. This here is just your little clamp, which clamps up against this part, which is the standoff onto the boiler, and this little bit here is the burner head. So yeah, we'll put that back together and fit it onto the loco. Putting things back together is pretty simple. This part here just screws in like this. Now you just got to think about it when you're turning your handle on. It's basically unscrewing that jet that you've just seen in there before. So pull that back up. That's nice and tight. Basically the only bit you need to make sure you put on first is that bit, because the burner head just screws on the front like that. And then this little piece sits in that little bit just in here. So I will just put that onto the loco now, and you can see that. Place the collar over like that. burner through the hole. Sort of move it all around so that you get your pipe back into the place it was before. Line up the screw holes. And just do them up. It's a pretty simple setup, so. And if you need to move the burner at all, just so that you can move this pipe wherever you need it, you just need to slacken off those and turn it whichever way you want. So all that's left is to replace the handle. And that's it. Whole thing's back together. So now the big thing is it going to work again? You can see just here I've made a modification to the assembly. Basically what was happening when the engine was running, all the plastic bits had worn out and it would just throw the rod out of the holder. So I drilled this side 8BA and tapped it that way, and then just turned up a bolt with a pin, I should say a pin, with a 3.1mm face basically, to fit the inside of this rod. Not too hard of a modification, and it seems to have helped it quite a lot. It runs and nothing falls to bits, which is good. Here's a close-up of the whole assembly. Here you can see the pin running through, and I've also made a retaining nut on the back. You do have to make sure that this doesn't foul with these bits of metal here. That just meant giving a little bit of a file just to get rid of any excess material. Now, as you will have seen in the video when I was putting the whole cylinder back together, this whole plastic thing fell off. Now, if you can see just in here, I've actually modified a circlip because there is already an indent in the rod itself, and so I've filed that circlip to fit through the plastic holder and then down into the grooves in the rod. I think it's held in place normally by some moulded plastic which was all worn out, and so it basically just slips off the end of the rod. The circlip modification, although it takes time to do, and I haven't done it on the other side because at the moment that side's fine, it is worth it. It holds it on quite well and it's nice and firm, so I don't think that side's going to be falling off. It just means that the other three plastic holders at some point may need upgrading like this, but I'll fix them as and when required.